Today, Netmums is joined by Lucy Upton, a children's dietitian and feeding specialist. You might know her as the children's dietitian online, to talk all things weaning. If you're about to start or you're already in the messy middle of it, this is everything parents really want to know to feel more confident. What are the key signs that your baby would be ready to start weaning?
Okay, so we're going to watch your baby, not just the clock, is what I would always say. 3 things. Your baby's able to hold their head up nice and steady and can sit a little bit unsupported. Doesn't have to be for ages, just steadiness and stability. Second thing is that they can see something, pick it up and bring it towards their mouth. So that will support self-feeding. And the third thing is that they are starting to lose the sort of tongue thrust reflex. So babies naturally push things out when they're little. And what we want is that food to start staying in. So they won't be pushing everything out. They're swallowing.
So you say not looking at the clock, so there's not a specific age?
So around 6 months is when most babies will hit those developmental milestones, and we definitely say not before 17 weeks, but every baby will probably hit those milestones somewhere in that sort of range.
How much should a baby be eating then when it's at the very beginning, when you've just started to wean?
Okay, the truth is they probably won't eat very much at all. And I think it's easy to think that my baby started eating and eating is this thing kids know how to do. They don't. Weaning is literally learning to eat. So I always say if they're not eating very much at all for weeks, and for some children it's even months, but they're exploring food, they're starting to get it in their mouth, maybe spitting some out, that mess, smearing, wearing it, that's all really good sign your baby is making progress.
So we're going to be expecting mess then, are we?
Yes, please, sorry. I hated the mess also, but we lean into it.
Okay, so what do you wish every parent knew before they began their weaning journey?
I suppose that there isn't just one right way to do it. I think sometimes we look for control as parents and wanting a bit of a plan, and a plan is fine, but a baby does not follow a plan. And I think meandering with different approaches, some people will start with purees, some people will use baby-led finger foods. The end goal is the same, regardless of the journey that you take to get there. There's not one sort of right or wrong way. And really, I always say to families, as long as you're working on giving them lots of food to explore, texture progression so babies can learn the skills they need to eat, that you're starting to create and foster that lovely mealtime environment, they're 3 key things to focus on.
So 2 options, you mentioned the puree and the baby led. So which way, how do you choose?
I think it's personal preference, and I think as long as you've done a little bit of reading and understanding beforehand, some parents will prefer to kind of use that very almost traditional method where we take some foods, we blend them down and we start offering them via a spoon, and it's often considered that that's quite a parent-led approach, but I will always caveat with you can definitely let your baby take the lead. We can load spoons and give it to them. We can follow their lead if they're turning their head away or if they're opening their mouth. So we can still follow your baby's lead, and we would want to sort of progress through textures and introduce finger foods too. Baby-led is very much the idea that we're sort of adapting family foods appropriately from the beginning and giving them finger foods that they self-feed right from day dot. And, most families I work with now do a bit of a combination of both.
Okay, so how does that work?
So let's say you picked, let's go with broccoli, a famous first finger food for many babies. You might cook some of that down and keep a really chunky floret that your baby's able to pick up with the palm of their hand because they're a bit grabby like this. And you'd want it big enough that it's sort of poking out the top of their sort of hands. That would need to be soft enough that when you are pressing that food between your finger and your thumb, it is falling apart, almost mirroring what's happening kind of in their jaw, in their mouth. And then you might take some of that and blend or mash it down with or without a bit of milk.
Brilliant. So is there anything that parents, you would say, shouldn't panic about? Because obviously it's a big, giving a baby food for the first time.
It's a massive milestone. It's a massive milestone. I would say the thing that most parents panic about, hands up, even I, who has done this for 16 years, was a little bit like, oh, this is quite uncomfortable, is the gagging that comes with weaning. And gagging is a very protective mechanism that babies have to essentially protect their airway. And it sits quite far forward in a baby's mouth when they're starting weaning around 6 months. And actually the process of working through weaning and that time frame usually also means that gag reflex is moving backwards. But to begin with, babies, when food hits a certain part of their mouth, their throat, their tongue, they may well be quite red, eye-watery, quite noisy. It's so uncomfortable to watch, but actually the best thing you can do is let them work it out. We say no fingers in mouths to try and take things out. Watch, it will feel like an hour even though it's only been a minute, I promise, but most babies are brilliant at sorting it out themselves. That is obviously quite different to choking, which is a risk during weaning, but please be reassured, if we're preparing food properly, we're sitting with our babies, choking is rare, really rare. And choking is when a piece of food actually blocks your baby's airway. And unlike gagging, which I've said is loud, dramatic, noisy, red, babies will be very quiet. That's why we don't leave them unattended when they're eating. They will often lose colour, so it might go blue, sort of paler ashen colour if they've got darker skin. They might look quite startled. You probably won't hear them making much noise. They will maybe looking like they're trying to gain breath, and that is immediate first aid and a 999 call. But it is very rare.
So the noise is good.
Noise is good. Noise is a really good sign. Like, honestly, you'll be like, wow, that's big, but that's normal.
Is there any foods then that should be completely avoided? You know, obviously we're talking about choking, which is obviously worst case scenario, but any foods that should just be not given anywhere near a weaning baby?
Okay, so a few things. Headlines: no honey, just because we have a very small risk of something known as infant botulism. So we say no honey in any form until 12 months of age. Obviously, no choking risks. Generally, those are kind of harder, rounder foods. So we wouldn't give whole nuts. We would give milled nuts or smooth nut butter. We wouldn't give whole grapes. We'd be cutting them into quarters. Same with things like cherry tomatoes, squashing blueberries. I always think that, people will say no hard sweets or jelly cubes. I'm hoping we're not giving those to babies anyway. We don't add salt or sugar to babies' meals, and we try and make sure things that might contain any natural salt or sugar are obviously at quite low levels. But aside from that, realistically, most babies can have most things.
That's good to know. I mean, I've got a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I've cooked grapes for years. So when actually can you stop? Because I remember at one point my son saying to me, "Mummy, you cannot put that in my lunchbox. It's embarrassing now because it's cut up." And I was still cutting.
Have you seen that meme when it's like a mum at a wedding, like, and my husband, my son's like 33 and I'm still cutting his grapes? That will be me.
Because the day you start, what if something goes wrong?
I know. So I think the thing to remember is, like those foods, those round, hard foods are really difficult to kind of let go of when we think, oh my God, when is it safe? What we know is that by around 4 or 5 years of age, most children will then have the skills and experience to work out those foods, the oromotor experience they would need to manage them. But realistically, those things never really stop being a choking risk, even for me or you. We had a whole grape and we laughed, we would still be at a risk. So, but we say 4 or 5. It's another reason why we're also very mindful about foods like popcorn, because you see a lot of popcorn being given for snacks as kind of young children and toddlers. Actually, that's sometimes worse because it's the perfect size, but also because it's so light. If a child inhales or is eating it whilst walking around and trips or anything like that, getting popcorn out of an airway is a nightmare. So no popcorn till at least 5 too.
Avoid the popcorn. Got it. What would you say is quite a normal thing that you know is normal, but that parents come to you that they're worried about?
So I think what I'm seeing quite a lot of at the moment, and I think social media probably feeds into lots of this anxiety for parents, because it's hard not to compare. It's really hard. Even I compared, and again, I've done it for a long time, is babies sort of progress through weaning. I think there can be quite a lot of noise around, your baby should be on 3 meals a day by like 7 months of age, and why aren't they eating whole meals yet? And actually, when you think about learning to eat being a skill, similar to learning to walk, learning to talk, your baby doesn't start waddling their first steps and you expect them to be running a marathon. You accept that it's a bit clumsy, it's quite wobbly, and actually it takes months for them to be much more proficient with that. But for some reason, we think that eating is this thing, as I've said already, kids just do. They've got to learn to do it. So those days when you feel like we're not making progress, it's really slow, they're not eating very much, for the most part, that is very normal for lots of babies through weaning. And I personally remember I think my daughter was around 8-9 months, and I sort of sat there and I thought, wow, we're really not actually eating that much yet. And I had a bit of a mum, without the clinical hat on, and mum like, is this normal? And I needed to bring myself back down and go, yeah, absolutely it is. Let's just keep going. So feeling like it's slow, not feeling like they're eating very much, is very common for most parents to experience at some point during weaning.
Yeah, I can completely understand that, but it's such a good comparison where you say you wouldn't expect them to just stand up and walk one day. It's a process. So actually, with food, it shouldn't just be something, because we only ever remember the fact that we can eat. No one remembers learning to eat. So of course, it's a skill. It's a skill.
If you remember nothing else, it's a skill they don't have that they're learning to have. Weaning is learning that skill.
And it can be a long, messy,
very bumpy up and down process. Because, of course, when your baby's weaning, eating is affected by lots of different things. If it gets hot, if we have a nice and hot summer, like, yes, please, your baby will eat less. Teething, they'll eat less. Ill, they'll eat less, or might not even be bothered at all. It might be, this is too hard today. And all of those bumpy bits are very normal part of the weaning process. It is rarely, I don't know a single parent that said to me, it's this lovely smooth, it was really easy. Someone has always struggled at some point.
So if someone's going through that, and even if they understand, you know, they've heard you speak and they understand it's a skill and they're really trying, but they're just finding it really hard, what would you say to them to sort of keep them going?
So what I would say is focus on the things you can control, because I think as parents, when we feel like something is going wrong, I think we can all relate to the fact that we try and jump into fix. And I think when you feel like your baby's not making progress with solids, the fixing thing that's easy to fall into is trying to take over feeding, over encouraging, perhaps just going back to all the foods you know they will take, so before you know it they're having, you know, tons of yogurt at every meal because at least they're getting something. Whereas I would say actually what we want to do is step back so our babies can kind of step up a bit and lean into that progress. So things you can do, keep offering that variety of foods. Think of every new food as a new learning experience, so it's going to take some time. Eat with them. Babies mirror. They do not do what they're told. They cannot have the comprehension to be like, eat it. They're going to be like, what are you talking about? But when they see their favourite person in the whole world, their mum, their dad, their grandma eating a food, you've made it safe, you've showed them what to do, and a baby's far more likely to mirror off of that. So actually, you know, I remember thinking, oh, I can't wait to be delighted for this lovely puree of like sardines and whatever it might be. Sucked it up a little bit and was like, do you know what, I'm going to eat some of this with you. I'm going to show you what this thing is to do. So, and just remember that you're not on your own in this process. I think in those moments it can be really easy to find that your friends at the baby group or online, you've got these children consuming wild amounts of food and everything their child puts in front of them. I need you to know that's a snapshot, and that is not the reality for most children.
And is it not?
No.
And coming on to that then, the kind of, you know, the fussy eaters, you know, what would you say to parents who just, they do want their child, the baby, to eat anything and everything, and they want them to try different things, but it's just, say they've had a banana and they've liked it and it's easy. It's easy to go back to. How do you not get into that trap?
I think it's about going, how often am I going to offer this food? And let's think about the foods that are in the like it box already. But actually, we want to make sure that we're splitting what we're offering between the like it box and the learning about it box, because kids learn to eat it first and then often they learn to like it, except for things that are easy. So purees that are easy to move front to back, sweet foods. Babies love sweet because it's familiar. Breast milk, formula milk is sweet. So actually just think about it in terms of, if I was wanting to take the next step with any skill, I have to do the hard bit, which is essentially getting it a bit wrong and having a go with it multiple times first. And it's worth that investment in that time frame, because between sort of 6 to 12 months, but especially 6 to 10 months, babies have this wonderful window of opportunity with flavour and texture. Their brains are almost primed and wired, ready to learn how to eat. So if we give them loads of different lessons at that point in time, they're going to build that filing cabinet of experience that they need with food. Whereas if we're sticking with just a handful of foods, they've got nothing else to draw on when that food's back in front of them again. So it's a steady process.
So do you get a lot of parents coming to you with you know, saying they've got a fussy eater?
I get a lot of parents coming to me with one of two things, often worried that their child isn't eating a good range of foods before that 12 months of age. But actually I get most of my food refusal and my fussy eaters in the toddler years, which is not a surprise, because actually development shifts hugely after one. And it really curveballs a lot of parents, because you might have a baby who's eating anything, who thinks that, you know, sardines and lemons and asparagus are the best thing since sliced bread, and you are like, I have nailed this. And then all of a sudden, beige. They're dropping foods. And understandably, you panic. And most parents think, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. In the driving seat for your child's development has come the fact that they don't need as much energy to grow anymore. Like, it drops. You will have a bigger child who will actually need less than a baby, which feels so counterintuitive. Their development is priming them for control. They don't want to be done to. They want to make choices. You know, I always say my 3-year-old is like a three-nager. Like, she thinks she may well be 30 the way that she acts. Honestly, it's brilliant. But they're going to try and take control, including around food. But also we have this developmental wiring for lots of toddlers where, thanks to the caveman era, where toddlers who could now mobilize and who have no impulse control because this part of their brain is not fully cooked yet, could take quite nasty risks. You know, oh, I'll eat that poisonous berry, I'll have a go at that rotting carcass. And so development has pulled in this beautiful thread to keep kids safe in the toddler years. And that thread almost feels like it works against us when we're offering a wide variety of foods, because it makes lots of toddlers much more cautious about bitter foods, aka vegetables, wet or slimy foods, aka lots of British dishes, you know, stews and pies and you know, mixed dishes. So actually, I just want to say that if your child is going through a fussy stage, it is not a parenting failure, it's usually development.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because part of you just thinks, just go and wean, and it's you know, done. And then, but there's all the science behind it.
There's so much science behind it. I could geek out on the science all day long, but I feel like my job is to translate that science into the why. Usually that takes pressure off, and actually some of the best things that we can do if we're struggling at meal times with kids is dial down the pressure, because they smell it a mile off, don't they? They're like, whoa, Mum, what's up with you? And if, you know, kids can't regulate their own emotions when they're young, they kind of need us to do it for them. And if we're anxious, if we're stressed, if we're worried, they pick that up, and that actually sends off the part of the brain that's online for learning. So they don't want to eat, they don't want to learn about something new. They usually get quite unsettled, they might eat a few things and they want to leave. Even appetite switches off. So I say sometimes we need to be swans, which might mean that we're like pedaling underneath, but we look graceful. We're happy, we're okay.
Which is, you know, a lot of parts of parenting, isn't it?
Oh, it's a skill. It's a skill, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
You know, and so I also think, you know, please be kind to yourselves as parents, because some days we just don't have the emotional bandwidth for that. You know, as I say, I can do it all day long because this is my bread and butter, but there are still days when I'm down to like the 1% battery and my daughter's food refusal activates me. But it's my stuff often, and that's really hard to pull back. It's really hard to pull back from and go, hold on a minute, I haven't done anything wrong, I don't need to fix this, it's okay.
It's not you.
It's not you.
You're doing your absolute best.
Every parent I meet is doing their absolute best, like, and I mean that.
Yeah,
they really are.
And is there anything that, you know, we've not discussed that you'd like to bring in? Maybe something that you're going to talk about on stage today, or?
I suppose two things. Let's talk about two things. The first thing that, and we haven't really talked about during weaning, but it's still something that I know riles and worries a lot of parents, is introducing allergenic foods. And lots of parents, I hope, will now know that we've taken a full 180 on that over the last kind of 10 years, really, where we used to say, don't introduce those foods, leave it till 3, you know, we don't want to make, you know, we want to make sure they don't have any kind of allergic reactions. The reality is now that the more and more we understand about allergy prevention, the more we understand it's about getting it in and keeping it in. So I promise this means you don't have to go and sit in your car at A&E with a jar of peanut butter. Really big adverse reactions during weaning from an allergy perspective are so rare. I can't tell you the last time I saw one, and I work with these children. What we want to do is focus on getting things like egg, peanut, tree nuts, wheat, soy, fish, all of those things in quite proactively during weaning. We don't delay. And the way I kind of explain that to parents is that actually what we want the body to do is label those foods as safe. And they get labelled as safe down in the gut, where in the gut we have lots of immune cells, and the immune system goes, that's safe. It's like the bouncer at the door being like, come on in. What we don't want the bouncer to do is say, you're not welcome, you shouldn't be here. I mean, they're incorrectly labelling someone, you know, it's the one who's saying at the door, I'm not that drunk, I promise. So we want them to label it as safe. So the way that we do that is we get it in early.
How early?
Pretty much once you've got going with weaning, from around 6 months of age, fine, get those foods in. And there will be a small group of children, namely those who have sort of moderate to severe eczema that's been quite early onset and may well have been difficult to manage, who may benefit from introducing earlier than that with health professional advice. So just to say, that's not something you're doing on your own, but if you've got a baby with eczema, I would be having a conversation about getting in some of those allergenic foods earlier, because we know those are the highest risk children.
Yeah, see, what I think is hard is, like you say, over the last 10 years it's shifted, but those messages still exist, don't they, with, you know, maybe grandparents and things like this. So how do you've got, I suppose as a parent, you've got to be informed, haven't you? And you've got to be able to say, no, the rules have changed now.
They have changed, very much changed. I think it's about being brave, and I think it's about, I think when you're a vulnerable parent and you're sleep deprived and you have this information and you're quite confident it's correct, it doesn't actually take that much to derail you. You know, it can be a comment from a grandparent who's quite confident about what they're saying. But I think what I'd remind all families is that actually guidance around feeding babies has really moved on. And if the books, if online health professionals are telling you that this is something that is evidence-based, then trust me when I say there is enough evidence behind it that we're making that recommendation. We don't take things lightly when we're making recommendations for how we feed babies and young children at all.
Of course. And so you said there was two things. One was allergies.
Yeah. Second thing I would say is dietary variety. So the gut microbiome is something that fascinates me and is something that I know is getting more and more attention. And with this sort of focus on gut health, lots of parents will say to me, what can I do to support my child's gut health? And honestly, the best thing that you can do is focus on that variety during weaning. So if you think about, there is a community of bacteria that will have established in your baby's gut through whatever means of milk feeding that they are having. There will be differences between breast and formula fed babies. But when you start solids, you have this real opportunity to start feeding the good bacteria what they want. And in the most part, that's plant-based foods. So getting in those fruits, veggies, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds and whole grains is a really good way to help that kind of gut microbiome explode with all of the bacteria we want there. And those bacteria have a really important job at modulating things like the immune system, so helping developing that immature immune system, talking to the brain. So I suppose this goes back to my point around sort of trying not to fall into a trap of just giving the things that they will eat and work on all those foods that we want them to eat. Just be careful with too much fibre too quickly.
So thank you so much, Lucy, for joining us here at Netmums and sharing such helpful advice. If you're starting your weaning journey, you can find out more on netmums.com.